Hey guys, this is Sandeep from RevAtlas and you're watching a camera review of the Apple iPhone 12 Pro Max. And before we get this started, please do remember to hit the subscribe button and also enable the bell icon to avoid missing any videos from us in the future. This year, the Pro models differentiate themselves from the non-Pro models by virtue of the LiDAR scanner and the telephoto cameras, but for the first time we're seeing a hardware difference between the vanilla Pro and Pro Max models. While the Pro itself is very capable with its 12MP f1.6 primary camera with OIS, a secondary 2x 12MP telephoto with f2 aperture and OIS, as well as the 12MP ultra-wide 13mm focal length and f2.4 aperture, the Pro Max takes it a step ahead by having a much larger sensor, albeit with identical resolution and aperture, but instead of the OIS, we get sensor shift technology. The sensor is 47% larger as well, and the pixel size is also larger at 1.7 micron compared to 1.4 micron on the regular Pro and non-Pro models. Apart from this, we also get 2.5x focal length on the telephoto with a tad bit smaller f2.2 aperture instead of the f2 on the others. As a result, you would notice that the camera module and the circles on the module are much larger than before as well. Now, before we get started talking about the results from these cameras, let's take a look at these two cases from Daily Objects, and they were kind enough to send us two samples, and my pick of the two would be the Bangalore one, but you can get the one for the city you live in as well as for whatever device you're using from the link in description below. Now, the 12 Pro Max builds on the 11 Pro Max images. You have very similar traits in terms of the overall strong suits such as the good colors, dynamic range, fast shutter as well as excellent detailing. But the dynamic range in particular is a whole another level on 12 Pro Max, and if you ask me, this is the main difference between the models in the 12 series or the 11 series when it comes to the primary camera. Judging by the specifications, you would assume that nighttime photography would benefit the most, and while it does, we will get to that soon as well, but this here is something that you should know makes a huge difference when it comes to the extreme challenging light conditions. The way the 12 Pro Max handles highlights in particular is stunning, and I haven't seen any other phone do it this well. The sharpness and detailing aren't great. While the sharpness and detailing are pretty good for a 12MP sensor, it isn't as great as high-resolution smartphones, but the difference is only tangible when you pixel peep and keep the two side by side. The other benefit of not having as many pixels is evident in terms of noise, as there's practically none even in the shadows. In terms of colors, the iPhone 12 Pro Max takes true to life looking photos, although in very rare scenarios the color comes out a bit more saturated. But the most important thing, and I would probably like to highlight now itself, is just how consistent the results are in terms of colors across all three cameras. No other manufacturer has done it this well and managed to make things look this similar. Aside from slight differences in dynamic range and sharpness, the images look like they came from the same sensor, albeit at different focal lengths, say by using a camera with a variable zoom lens. The ultra-wide angle camera is really wide and the optical quality is great. In well-lit conditions, you won't really find any difference at a glance from the regular camera, but pixel peeping will reveal the higher noise levels and lower resolve detail. Still one of the best that we have seen. The 2.5x zoom on the telephoto lens is a welcome change considering how many flagship phones these days offer even 5x optical zoom through periscope lenses, and while this still can't compete in terms of absolute reach, quality-wise this does really well. I'm someone who prefers an ultra-wide angle camera to a telephoto camera due to my habit and hobby of capturing architecture and landscape, but with the 12 Pro Max I found myself capturing a lot more with the telephoto camera due to the perspective that it provides, and in particular the portrait skills, which I shall talk about very soon. The optical quality is great and consistency in colors is also great, like I mentioned earlier. Coming to the portrait mode, this is one area where I hope to see an improvement in, considering iPhones in the past didn't really excel at this. When I heard of the rumors regarding LiDAR, it raised my hopes further, and I'm glad to say that they really have improved the edge detection. Just how much of a difference is down to LiDAR I'm not sure because I haven't tried the regular 12 series phones, but I suspect that it is the one that has helped the most here. The edge detection is better than ever and the blurring seems more natural too. This is where I enjoy the forced perspective of the 2.5x lens along with the already natural subject separation, and when the lighting is good I'd suggest using this over the primary camera, especially due to the more accurate representation of subjects. In terms of low light capabilities, the night mode in the 11 series was already one of the best, and perhaps the P30 Pro being the only phone that could outdo it thanks to the RYYB sensor, but the 12 Pro Max improves upon it further thanks to a larger sensor with larger pixels, which results in very clean looking photos that's amongst the best, if not the absolute best, in a flagship this year. The ultra-wide angle camera supports night mode now as well, and while it doesn't get as good as the primary camera, the difference between using it and not using it is a lot and makes a huge difference to the end photo. Noise is higher, colors are less accurate compared to the primary camera, but the images are still one of the best from an ultra-wide angle camera on a smartphone. In terms of lens flare, this was a phenomenon that was particularly apparent in the 11 series, and it has been carried on to here as well. And I'm someone who enjoys the lens flare occasionally because it can look good and adds to the image artistically speaking when done right, but when too much it can be annoying as well. In these examples, I felt it was fine, but I also do see a variation on some units where there's some ghosting and or worse lens flare, at which point it becomes annoying and unacceptable. If you do have this in your unit, it's best to get your phone replaced. The front-facing camera is also a 12MP f2.2 unit and takes great quality photos, portraits in all lighting conditions with good exposure, colors, good sharpness and tones. It shoots in a narrow field of view by default, but you can opt for the wide mode if you want. In terms of video, the 12 Pro Max can do 4K 60fps videos with HDR, and you have EIS in all the cameras as well as sensor shift stabilization on the primary camera and OIS on the telephoto. I can go on and on about the video capability and the details regarding the formats and HDR for example, but that itself would probably need a separate video to be explained well. In fact, I'll link KD's video on iPhone HDR, which would help you better understand what the iPhone is doing and is capable of, but just know that there is no smartphone out there that can record as good videos as the iPhone 12 series, and specifically the 12 Pro Max, which is another reason for me using the telephoto camera all that much for that first perspective in videos. The videos have insane dynamic range, great colors, and overall look very refined, similar to what you would get from a mirrorless camera on a gimbal for example. As a Pro Max user, I'm happy with the changes and improvements brought to the table, and I do understand that some non-Pro Max users may be upset that they're getting the raw end of the deal with inferior hardware. I think Apple could have made the difference more tangible if they wanted, but chose not to do it to avoid upsetting users too much. I have a feeling that we may see a similar offset in hardware even next year and in the years to come, where the larger footprint offered by the larger Pro models or the Pro Max models will allow the brand to experiment with more hardware such as periscope lenses. Apple had been far behind, not just in terms of the number of lenses or cameras or in terms of the resolution on offer, but more importantly in terms of the outright image quality on their smartphones. While it made huge leaps with the 11 series, it is safe to say that the 12 Pro Max this time around they are king once again, and in terms of image quality, dynamic range and videos, Apple is the one to beat. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you again in the next one.